A strong foundation is critical to the success of a structure. The foundation provides a sturdy and stable platform for the structure to stand upon. In miniature gaming, bases are the foundations of our models. They have a functional role in keeping our mini soldiers, vehicles, and scenery from falling over. Just look at this piece of miniature terrain. Whoever crafted this was really cutting corners on the base work. The piece is just waiting to fall over. Bases are functional, but what about aesthetics? Miniature gaming is a genre that puts more emphasis on the visuals of game pieces and table setup than most tabletop games. Miniature and terrain bases are an opportunity for modeling and painting. In this video, I will share how I base much of my terrain along with some useful materials and tips for designing and decorating bases. This video will focus on basing terrain, but the concepts can be applied to basing miniatures too. Now let's go over some materials that will be needed to create some of these base effects. Most battles in miniature gaming are on tabletops representing an outdoor setting. Smooth, flat ground is uncommon outdoors, so most of the time you'll want your bases to have a rough texture. This is generally simulated by gluing some grit to the base, then painting it to match the appearance of the desired ground material. I usually use slightly watered down PVA glue for the adhesive and some sandbox sand for grit. I prefer sand because it adds weight to the base, thereby lowering the center of mass of the model and increasing stability.
I don't like sand.
Well, there are other grit options you could try. I've heard of people gluing coffee grounds and even dirt to bases to create a rough ground texture. Texture brings quite an impact to the appearance of models. For some bases, this ground texture and some paint is all the detail you really need. Stone is a material often represented in decorated bases. Smooth and chipped pebbles glued to the base serve as small or medium-sized rocks. Please note that pebbles add weight to the base, which increases the stability of the model, just like adding sand. If added weight is not what you're looking for, then XPS foam can be carved to simulate small stones. XPS foam is also useful for carving pieces of stone rubble and large boulders. If your terrain is for a more modern or futuristic setting, then you can carve foam board and XPS foam to resemble crumbled chunks of concrete. I usually glue all of these stone-related features to the base using PVA glue before or at the same time as the grit texturing is added. You may want to add some plant life to your bases too. Flora is another common decoration for bases. Moss and grass are easily simulated by gluing flock and static grass to the base. Bristles from old paintbrushes as well as coconut coir or fiber make excellent tall grass. If you want some small plants, bushes, shrubs, or brambles, then tear off pieces of craft store colored and preserved reindeer lichen and glue them to the base. Branches, logs, and twigs are super easy to simulate too. Just glue tiny sticks and twigs to the base. These foliage additions do not require paint, so it is best to hold off on attaching them to the base until after all painted elements are complete. Speaking of paints, use the cheaper craft store acrylic paints on the bases of terrain pieces. Terrain bases have a lot of surface area. It is usually not worth coating such bases with more expensive miniature paints. Natural colors such as browns and grays will be useful for coloring the dirt and rocks of most bases. A little white paint is also useful for mixing to make brighter colors. Most painted details on a base will benefit from a dark wash. If you're out of wash, then you can get by with a watered down mixture of black or black and brown paint. So now we have a list of base decoration materials. Let's talk a little bit about base planning. Plan out what you want your bases to look like before you start detailing them. You could make a themed base that resembles a specific environment. What miniature games do you play? What are the settings for those games? You may want to design the bases of your terrain to match those environments. Rough texture and small rocks painted a mix of yellow and khaki will resemble desert ground. Paint more brown and add some grass and you have a grassland base. If your games are set across a wide range of different environments, then a generic base design is worth consideration. I'm always switching up my miniature wargaming tabletops. I lean toward generic bases so that some of my scenery will be aesthetically compatible with most environments. What is your favorite environmental theme for basing? Leave a comment below. Come up with a plan and gather the necessary components. Now it is time to see some base decorating in action. I made some miniature trees with detailed bases for my last video. Here I will share the workflow and techniques that I employed to combine many of these components into some beautiful terrain pieces. Let this be an example of how to create a decorated base. My design for these bases is a dark brown dirt ground with small patches of grass, mixed size gray rocks, shrubs, and some tufts of tall grass. My workflow for these bases is as follows. Add the rough ground texture and imitation stones and rocks to the base. Then fully paint those details. Glue and seal in patches of flock, and finally attach the larger foliage components. First up is the textured ground and stones. Slightly thin some PVA glue with water and paint it over the top of the base. Do not apply the glue to areas where models or additional decorations will be added after the base is textured. I carved some XPS foam for the larger rocks and pressed them into the glue in random positions. I dropped a few chipped pebbles onto the glue around the large rocks, but also in a few random spots. Next, I sprinkle sand over the remaining exposed glue on the base. Gently pat the sand into the glue, then tilt the base and lightly tap it to shake off any excess sand. If any of the larger pebbles fall off, then just simply glue them back into their positions. Drip or dab some watered down glue over patches of the sand to soak the surface so it fully bonds to the base as it dries. Wait for the glue to dry before proceeding. At this point, all of the base details that will be painted have been attached. Now it is time to paint. If the base you are decorating has an unpainted model already attached to it, then it would be efficient to paint both the model and the base now. Start with a layer of paint primer if you wish. It'll help create a stronger paint job. I decided to just skip primer for these pieces. Find or mix up a color of paint for the textured ground. I am painting the ground to look like dark dirt, so I'm using a mix of mostly burnt umber with a little bit of chocolate brown acrylic craft paint. Paint one layer on the textured ground and the edges of the base, and follow with a second layer once the first dries. Find a color for the rocks. I am going for simple gray rocks. Paint the large and small stones. When the first layer dries, give them another coat. When all of the paint has dried, it is time for a wash. The wash will darken the crevices as artificial shading. Brush the wash on all of the surfaces you have previously painted and let it dry. Add another coat of wash if necessary. Once dry, we finish our paint job with some dry brushing of lighter colors. I went for a white and gray mix and focused mostly on highlighting the edges of the stones. You can dry brush before the wash, after, or both for different results. I gave the dirt a light dusting of gray before the wash for a subtle highlight. Now the base is fully painted. The last details I added to these bases are the shrubs, grass patches, and tall grass tufts. Water down a little more PVA glue and paint a scattering of small spots on the base. Sprinkle some green flock over the glue, lightly press it into the glue, and then shake off the excess flock. When you have placed all of the flock grass patches, then drip a small amount of watered down glue onto those patches to seal the flock firmly in place. The green flock can also be applied to the stone details to represent moss. The remaining foliage decorations can be glued to the base with hot glue. To create the tall grass tufts, simply pinch together a small bundle of coconut coir or fiber and shove the pinched end into a blob of hot glue on the base. You can hide the sides of the hot glue blob with a little paint or some reindeer lichen shrubs. The reindeer lichen can also be attached by hot glue. Tear off a piece of desired size and carefully press it into a blob of hot glue on the base. A few tiny blobs of hot glue or PVA on a tiny stick will be sufficient to secure it to the base as a fallen branch or log. Now you know how to decorate bases for miniatures and model terrain. You have options for adding different types of foliage to your bases. Rocks are a common detail that is easily added. A textured surface is another valuable addition, as rough ground looks more realistic. Painting the textured bases gives you even more options for depicting environments on the bases of your models. Put these materials to use. Decorate those flat, plain bases. Doing so will push your models one step closer towards beautiful, seamless tabletop scenery. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. For more content, you can check out the rest of the channel as well as our blog at gamingtome.com. Thank you for watching, and to all of you out there, keep building and keep gaming. Looks like it would topple over at the slightest gust of wind. You know what?